How do you start your day? With coffee. The best part of waking up is not literally that brand, not sponsored, definitely not endorsing. What's the very first thing you do when you wake up? There's probably a few things that you could do. In our house, it might be letting the dog out because he desperately wants to go out. It might be starting the coffee maker, or in our house, warming up the espresso machine. You don't want, even though the water will be heated within like a minute, you really want the whole thing you want the cups on top to be warm. You just want to take some time. For you, maybe you grab breakfast, most important meal of the day. How many check the weather? You didn't have to check it, you just had to look out the window today, right? Do you check the news or the sports scores from last night when you fell asleep? Do you do that? No, just me. Sometimes it's a sad situation and you want to go to bed and just pray that the result is what you want, and then you wake up. But for many people in our world, in our culture, the very first thing we reach for is our phone. It's maybe right next to you. Maybe it's still glowing. I don't know. But before our feet hit the floor, we're already checking messages or notifications, headlines, emails, and then without even realizing it, we're letting that kind of set the tone for the day. For a little while now, I've tried to make a habit, and it can take a while to do this, but I've developed a habit of reading scripture every day, of course, but not only that, but starting my day, even ending my day with the Psalms or other scriptures, and then even a Timothy Keller devotional. And so as I was wrapping up in kind of mid-December, I was getting near the end of the Psalms and the particular devotional I was reading. And I've read the Psalms, I was thinking this week, like thousands of times. Might not be too low of a number just because of being in college and then reading it daily. And every year I, at minimum, go through the Psalms twice. And they're considered the songs of Jesus. He actually quotes the Psalms more than any other kind of text of Scripture. And so that intrigues me, and so I love being in it. There are some that are really happy and cheerful, and then there's some that have so much angst and frustration in them, yet crying out to God. I just love the variety that's in the Psalms, that they are there for us to both pray and contemplate and to sing. And then there's this verse that kind of stood out to me. I'm sure that I had read it before, yet it wasn't highlighted, and maybe because it was in a different translation, a different version that I had heard in recent years, it just popped out. And so this verse kind of surfaced during evening devotions back in December, and then it stayed with me. And by that, I mean, not only did I highlight it, I put it in my kind of daily to-do, something that I see every morning. And there's a verse from way back in March 2020 that I've read every day since, because it's still relevant to me. And this was just one more verse that I felt like I need to continue to kind of read and pray this each day. And so I've been returning to it every morning. And there's this thought, is it's still kind of the new year for me, and now I'm back. This is my first opportunity to preach in 2026. I wanted kind of the word. I wanted God to direct me to the pulpit, not just get up here because it's time to do it, but this verse stood out to me. So I want us to read. I want you to hear this verse that I'm kind of contemplating daily, and maybe you can as well. Psalm 143:8. It's a Psalm of David, and the way he writes it in the NIV is this: "Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love. For I have put my trust in you. Show me the way I should go, for to you I entrust my life." I love that. Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love. The morning brings word of lots of things, but what if you started it with God's unfailing love? Here, before David asks for direction, he asks to hear. In my Bible, I usually am reading out of the New Living. It actually reads this way: "Let me hear of your unfailing love each morning." And so David is inferring something we often forget, and don't miss this. Direction from God comes out of a relationship with God. Direction from God. I think if you've ever been a teenager, some of us were teenagers, some of us remember those days, we were looking for direction. People were asking, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? We were like, I don't know. God, give me direction. Well, direction from God comes from a relationship with God. Before direction comes a loving word from God, because direction without love is just pressure. Obedience without love could become fear. And trust without love actually is just exhausting. So David actually begins the day the right way, listening for God's love. Again, let me hear your unfailing love. I think of it this way. If I know I'm loved in this context, I can entrust my life to God. If I know that he loves me, I can trust him. I can start my day, I can continue my day because of his love. And what David longed for, we've actually been given. There's this loving voice that David listened for. Well, there's actually a person that we can walk with, because before Jesus ever says go, doesn't he say come? Before we follow Jesus, we learn to listen to him, because we don't just start the day with decisions, we start the day with his love. At least that's what I'm proposing we should do today. So think of morning as kind of a daily posture, not just a time of day. David actually names what we all need: love to begin the day, trust then to move forward, and then a way to walk. And so David, he doesn't just ask for a map, he actually entrusts himself to God. God will be the direction. And so if I had a title for this message, it would be, it's not the route, it's the relationship. Do you say route or route? Route? How many are route? How many are route? Just, I don't know. Some of us, depends on if you're from Peniac or Devon or Marys. I don't know. Well, that's for another day, but Devon, by the way. Route? I don't know. Coin toss. So it's not the route, it's the relationship. So how does God actually show us the way? Because direction is part of the deal. It's something we need. Well, David's son, in my Bible, it's just pages over, David's son is accredited for this kind of wisdom in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Again, something that maybe back when you were a teenager, young adult, maybe it's still something you're reading today, but this is something that just seems so helpful, so relevant, somewhat basic, yet so profound. It reads this way: trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Some of you are probably saying the words because you've memorized it, whether in this translation or another. It goes on: seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Have you ever read that before? Does that sound familiar? If it doesn't, maybe this could become something familiar that could be really practical from here on out. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he'll show you which path to take. I think if we want God to show us which path to take, Proverbs really gives us at least two kind of responses that we can take. Well, one is trust in the Lord with all your heart. Easier said than done, but at least it's really clear. Because direction actually begins with dependence, not understanding. Dependence on God for being the one to actually do this. And secondly, seeking his will in all you do, well, this means that really guidance should flow from a relationship, not control, not just wanting the details, not just wanting the information, but a relationship. Because I think we could argue that trust is not passive, definitely not, but it is how we walk with the Lord, trusting in him. This isn't new. David actually prayed for the same posture. Just a few verses later, after our opening verse, he says this: teach me to do your will, in verse 10. May your gracious spirit lead me forward on a firm footing. That's a great prayer that you could pray even today. The whole teach me part, you could think of the formation rather than just information. You could consider this being part of our spiritual formation, spiritual discipline even. So formation rather than information. The lead me part would be about his presence, not a pressure from him, but really his presence. And stating, my God, that's relationship, again, before direction. What I found interesting as I was kind of preparing and as God was kind of leading me through this week, there's a bit of a story kind of running through this and kind of behind the scenes. I always love when God kind of connects different verses. Someone shared a sermon with me this week from someone that preached back in October down in, I think, maybe Atlanta. And as they were beginning, they were talking about being at a conference and God kind of giving them a few different verses to share. And sometimes at a conference or a special event like that, there's maybe a preacher for the Friday night, maybe someone else for the Saturday morning, and then the Saturday night again. And they don't always confer before they get up to preach. They just prepare for the weeks leading up and then get up and do it. And so this preacher was sharing how he wasn't going first, but he had these particular verses that he felt God was giving him. And then as he's listening to the first preacher actually starts in the verse that he was going to start with, and he's like, oh man, maybe I have to change my my sermon. And then sure enough, the next verse, oh no, the second one is also where this guy's going. And then the third one, instead of feeling kind of like he had prepared the wrong thing, he started actually feeling a piece of like, God, maybe you were just giving me a heads up that this is where you want us all to be today. Sometimes God gives us direction in this way. What I love is that the verse that we started with is considered a Psalm of David. He is at least accredited with many of the Psalms, and it's excellent to know that because we have so much information about him throughout the Old Testament. And then this proverb that we just shared, Solomon would be his son, and so David has this prayer, and then Proverbs, Solomon has this wisdom. So what begins as kind of a prayer in a father's heart becomes wisdom in the son's life, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't, because God didn't just preserve David's line. He actually fulfilled David's longing through the Son of David. And who is the Son of David? Jesus. So what David prayed for and what Solomon actually taught us to trust, God answers by sending Jesus. And so as I turn over to John 1, there are two verses in the short span of maybe a paragraph that I'd like to share with you. One, we actually would have been looking at just around Christmas time. It's the way that John kind of shares it is the Word, and he's speaking of Jesus. That's a poetic way that he considers Jesus. He said, so the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. Just a few verses later, he says, for the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. David was asking, would you bring me word of would you let me hear of your unfailing love every morning? And then Solomon, his son, was saying, well, if you were to trust in the Lord with all your heart and not lean on your own understanding, but acknowledge him in all your ways, and he'll show you what path to take. If that's what you're looking for, direction, let it start with love. Let wisdom be breathed into that. But here is Jesus. He is unfailing love. He is faithful. And so Jesus comes. The word that David longed for is flesh. God didn't just give instructions. He came near to us. I love in one paraphrase where we're reading that the Word became human. He took on flesh and blood. I love how, I think it's Eugene Peterson says, he moved into the neighborhood. He wasn't distant at all. He walked among us. He came near. God doesn't just give direction. He actually invites us into a relationship. And so here's kind of a big shift, is that the gospel isn't a route to follow. We've talked about for a year now that the gospel, it is not advice. It's an announcement. The reason that it's called good news, the original language is actually trying to communicate that it's just that, it's good news. It's something that if a messenger was running to, I've got something to tell you, it would be good news that would bring great joy, not just because of the Christmas story, but because of so much packed into it. It's rich. The gospel isn't a route to follow. It's actually a relationship to enter. We don't just walk a path, we follow a person, and his name is Jesus. Jesus didn't say, here's the route. He said, follow me. And by the way, it's always good to know that when he said, follow me, he meant follow me and be my disciple. He meant, I'm walking this way. I am the way. Follow me. Get in line behind me. Watch what I do. Listen to how I teach. But keep your eyes on me. Follow me. Follow me and be my disciple. I was privileged to get to go on a trip over Christmas. Kelsey's Nona just yesterday turned 95. And we got to go and spend a few weeks in the little village in northern Italy that she grew up in and lived for many years. Her sister's still there, and nephew and different relatives. And so I was privileged to get to go back there. I've been there in the summer when it's super hot. I've been in the fall when it's just right. And then I've been in the winter when I can go up a mountain and go skiing. So there you go. As we were there, one of the cousins, known as nephew Enrico, wanted to take us to Austria. And it sounds very exotic, but it's kind of like just going into the next province. You know, it was that close. And so have you ever followed the leader? They're driving somewhere and there's no GPS. You're not looking at a map. You're just, that's the car. Keep your eyes on the taillights. Have you ever done that? So I'm driving stick over there as you would. Just picture a Bond film, right? Okay, that's me, you know, just going through there. Or maybe Jason Statham. I look a little bit more like him than Bond, right? It's the haircut. I just don't have the accent. But as we were going through the mountains, and it's beautiful, and there's times where you're going through tunnels and you're realizing that, oh boy, the Olympics is less than a month away and they're still trying to build it. You know, it's pretty fun. But as we're going through, the goal is that Enrico's in the lead car, and so follow him. And if you get separated, drive faster. I don't know, just get up there to the lead car. And I'm sure I could have turned on GPS, but I would rather just follow the leader to the way that he's going. He knew the way. He had been there before, and so I trusted. So he's leading. He knew the destination. He knew the route or the route, or what do they say in Italian? We'll figure that out later. But our job wasn't to figure out the path. Our job was to stay behind him. Right? He's in the lead. And so as long as we could see the taillights, we were okay. If he turned, we turned. If it was time to stop for espresso, well, convenient. I'm always up for that. If they slowed down, we slowed down. We didn't need the map. We just needed to stay close. And that's kind of a picture of following Jesus. He knows the destination. He knows the way. Our role isn't control. It's trust. As long as we're following him, we're going the right way, even if we don't know every turn, because we won't know every turn. But, you know, what does it look like when we get lost, or at least feel that? Because let's be honest, sometimes following Jesus doesn't feel clear. Is that a true statement? At least for this pastor. Even people who love him can feel disoriented at times. But the truth is, Jesus isn't a GPS. You know, a GPS, yes, gives directions, and it even recalculates, but it doesn't actually walk with you, right? It's different. It's a technology, but we can treat Jesus this way, only checking for the next move, just kind of wanting instructions more than actually just his presence. But the trick is, and this happens in not just religion, but especially in that, is that that's a transaction. It's not trust. Transactions, that's not what relationships are meant to be built on. And so there's a guide and there's a GPS, but if you think of it, Jesus, if you're saying, show me the next turn, that's important, but that's a little bit more of the transaction. But if you're like, Jesus, I'm walking with you, or would you walk with me? That's trust. That's a relationship. But when we lose our sense of direction, you know, we haven't lost our guide. I think there's times of walking with Jesus that it's not all uphill or downhill. Sometimes you're in that valley. Another psalm that David wrote that is maybe his most famous talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But notice that in that, God's not on one side or the other waiting for us to get through, but he actually walks with us in the midst of that. Aren't you glad? And so what path should we take? Jesus. Wherever he's going, that's where I want to be. Wherever he is, wherever he's going, that's our path. In that proverb that David's son Solomon is accredited for, there's this part of it in verse 6 that says, in all your ways submit to him. This isn't just for big spiritual moments. It's not just for big decisions. I think he means in all your ways. I think that's everyday life. I think that's in the morning. I think that's even in the afternoon and evening. And let me just clarify that word submit or what submission means here. To submit means to place yourself under his care. It's really to trust his guidance because he's Lord, right? And so it's to come under and realizing that you're not the one in the driver's seat necessarily. Why? Because he's the Lord. And so it's to place yourself under his care, to align yourself under his guidance. He's the Lord, and so trust him. Let that be part of the building of that relationship. And so to submit to Jesus is actually to say to him, I trust you to lead because you're my Lord. I trust you to lead. I'm going to follow you, even when I don't know which way we're going. I'm going your way. And so here's our simple application today before we close. It's really just 3 simple things that come out of this today. Start each day. This would be my recommendation. I'm trying to do this. Start each day by entrusting yourself to Jesus. What I've been doing, regardless of the other verses that are going to be part of my reading plan, I make sure that I'm reading that verse, and I read it in a few different versions, but I say, and I kind of prayerfully use David's words, and I say to the Lord, let me hear of your unfailing love each morning. And so tomorrow morning, I'm going to read that, and I'm going to pray that. And the same on Tuesday, and so on. Would you consider that as well? Even if you just remember that opening line, Lord, let me really bring word of your unfailing love to me each morning. So start each day by entrusting yourself to Jesus. Listen to his loving voice. That would be reading his word, listening to him, spending time with him. But don't let it stop there. Walk with him through the day. The last kind of piece of a verse is really a paraphrase I'd like to share with you. In the Message, I love how this is paraphrased. He writes, and this is so prayerful too, isn't it? If you wake me each morning with the sound of your loving voice, I'll go to sleep each night trusting you. Really encapsulates morning and evening. Could you start your day with the Lord? And I hope that you continue to walk with him throughout, but would you end the day as well trusting in him? And so just in closing, just remember Christianity, this religion we're a part of, it doesn't begin with a path to walk, but a person to follow. And what path should we take? Well, Jesus, wherever he's going, that's the path I want to take. And remember, it's the relationship, not just the direction, because direction from God comes out of a relationship with God. I would encourage you to build a relationship, embrace a relationship with Jesus. We don't just follow the way of Jesus, we follow Jesus. He is the way. So wherever he is, wherever he's going, that's our path. You don't have to know the exact path, because when you know Jesus, you know the way.